Well, tonight has certainly been a storm of developments, to say the least, and also a storm of rage which has been brewing all over the internet for the developments of the latest episode of Game of Thrones, which I will review now. Sorry, Kyle, I'm keeping the glasses on for this. I'm just kind of rolling through this real quick. Um, wow. I'm a little bit perplexed by what to say. Now, I enjoyed this episode for the most part, but there's a lot of people, and again, I hate to use this, but a lot of non-book readers who are upset about it, understandably so. Uh, and I just have a hard time of where to begin on this. This is a review for Game of Thrones Season 3, Episode 9, The Rains of Castamere. I apologize for not doing a review on the Second Sons episode within the last couple of weeks. I actually enjoyed that for the most part, especially the wedding scenes with Tyrion getting drunk and just a lot of the developments out of there. The stuff with Melisandre seducing Gendry, and then her idea of bloodletting from him and then barbecuing leeches to cast death on three of the kings, Robb Stark, Joffrey Baratheon, and Balon Greyjoy, was interesting. Almost, if they had aired it last week, with the barbecuing method, could have been a good Memorial Day plug, but that didn't happen. But needless to say that I thought the episode, for the most part, was perfect, particularly because we wandered away from the Theon getting tortured scenes, which I really started getting annoyed at after a fashion. But we did have major developments in this episode. Some have been pretty good and some have been rather disappointing. How did I feel about them? Well, let's find out. Let's start out with, out of the 4 point of views which we followed this week, let's talk about the small matter with Daenerys, which is probably, outside of the big climactic finish to tonight's episode, is the best thing that I've seen in here. The stuff concerning Daenerys, after we got Pretty Boy, who was one of the 3 mercenaries who rode up to her. Kind of the twist from last week's episode where he betrayed 2 of his buddies, one of whom looked like the Juggernaut from X3, and a big hulking Native American. He cast his loyalty to Dany, and now they're getting ready to invade Yunkai. Well, we have a stealth force of Grey Worm, Jorah Mormont, and Darius, or I'll just call him Pretty Boy for the duration of this review. They make a stealth infiltration into Yunkai and plan on conquering it for Daenerys. Now, which, by the way, before I get into the details of this, I have to say the one thing that I hated that I did not get to address was Daenerys from last week's episode, standing up in the bathtub. Not just because of her physical beauty, but the way that she was acted, really looking like a queen, and they've done some terrific character progression for her this season. She just absolutely radiated sexy to me from that. But getting back into this before I get sidetracked, this was a good episode, and we had some pretty good fight scenes all the way throughout it. There's a bit of an uneasy alliance, which is alluded to between Jorah and Pretty Boy. I think Jorah is starting to have some jealousy issues, which is developing. We can get the telltale signs of it, especially from the way that Darius moved in on Daenerys, and apparently Jorah doesn't like this, which is some interesting seeds to plant and will probably be expanded upon later on. But for the most part, this episode was pretty good. Now, we didn't get to see the entire infiltration and taking out of a lot of the soldiers in the city, but at the same time, it's alright. Things happen off camera, and we got other things going on, and I'm cool with that. But the fight scene is probably the best in this episode. The other one, which is pretty good, but this one kind of outranks it a little bit. Just absolutely loved it. Then we move into Sam and Gilly wandering somewhere, which after the developments of last episode where Sam killed the other, which was pretty cool, but yeah, this is kind of another passing thing. It just doesn't really amount to much. We get Bran, Rickon, the Reed kids, Hoder and Asha holed up in this old windmill, and basically it's kind of reached a point to where Bran still is intent on his quest to find this three-eyed crow, and it's kind of a decision made in between him and Asha that they must part ways. And it's kind of a sad scene. Didn't really amount to much. Nobody really talked about it in the reviews, which surprised me. But I was kind of moved for the plight of the young boy having to leave his brother. And then we have kind of this maternal instinct, which is awakening in Asha as she spent more time with the boys. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But ultimately, this just amounted to them parting ways. Now, there is another area which they'll come into, which I'll get to shortly. We also have Jon, whose loyalty is now put to the test with Tormund and the Skinwalker and Ygritte. Basically, that plan to actually test his loyalty of whether or not he is with Mance's group or he's still a crow at heart is finally revealed to a lot of them. A little bit early to my surprise. I thought they were going to kind of drag this out a little bit. Well, there's a lot of shit that's been dragged out with Jon this season that I wasn't too happy about. And this kind of became underwhelming. Now, what is very formulaic so far with the seasons of Game of Thrones is that the 9th episode is supposed to be the high point and a lot of major developments taking place. About half of this is realized in this episode, and this is really one of the most underwhelming parts of it. Unfortunately, which we're treated to a very wonderful choreographed fight scene out of this. Not as good as the one in Yunkai, but still pretty good nevertheless. I do find it interesting that at least Jon gets to deliver a little bit of anger to Skinwalker, but he's not gone just yet. He takes a sword to the gut, but remember, my friends, from last season, what is dead may never die. I love this part. He actually comes down, as like he is dealt a mortal blow, he actually spirits his soul into the eagle and comes down and actually claws the shit out of Jon's face, which is at least a nice party gift. So I don't wonder if that's going to be a problem. Now, there's an entirely different way from which the story dealt with this, but at the same time, I am interested to see how this will transpire, especially since that Jon and Ygritte have been forced to part ways at this point as well. Now, what's interesting about this, too, and there's also going to be a nice little parallel, which I'll bring up once we get to the Red Wedding, concerning Bran and Jon at that point. Arya and the Hound are making their way to the Twins at this point. I'm kind of moving along and just getting through this awfully quick, because there's not really a lot to say about this episode. We get to the high point, which is the Red Wedding, and is something which has just been storming the internet with a shitstorm of anger, particularly at George R. R. Martin over the events which have transpired in this. A lot of people were very upset for the way that the Red Wedding went down. Arya came that close to the castle at the time that the wedding was taking place. Ed Muir is married off to one of Walter's daughters, and we're given the air that everything might be all right in between the Frey family and the Stark family, but that pretty much goes south, in a sense. Basically what transpires is that after a certain point we get the Rains of Castamere played, which, if you're been doing a little research or you recall the conversation in between Marjorie and Cersei from the last episode, that song tells a sad story about how a family was massacred by some conquerors. And this is pretty much ringing true at this point. Now, what's interesting about this, too, is that I was caught a little bit off guard, at least concerning Rob's wife in this episode. Having somebody just walk up to her after they escorted the couple out that was wed for the wedding ceremony. Walter just laid all his cards on the table and let his true intentions fly, and there was just a complete massacre of Stark and his supporters. Not even the direwolf was spared of this. And this is probably some of the strongest acting that I've been introduced to from the actress portraying Catelyn Stark this season. Now, we've had a couple of scenes with her where I was kind of a little bit more moved for her plight, considering that she is a mother in this show, than I was in the story. And her strongest performance really comes out at the end of it, just before she's dealt a mortal blow herself. She watches her daughter-in-law, her son get killed, and she winds up killing Walder Frey's wife before she herself is actually taken out of the picture. And this has just absolutely thrown up everyone into arms, at least for a lot of the non-book readers. Now, I don't like using this term. I can understand people being upset at this, but this is kind of a point to where we have to go back to you kind of it's not really that you should have seen this coming, but more to the fact that this is kind of commonplace, which is going to happen from time to time in Game of Thrones. This show is pretty much The Walking Dead, but much more fantastical, and given a lot of the reactions that people had to Ned Stark's death a couple of years ago, this is really creating a firestorm right now of complete and utter outrage. I've had a couple of fans who are non-book readers who actually kept up with the show that I've talked to, and they're actually considering dropping the show. I think one of them was done at a certain point. Larry certainly said that he's dropping the show pretty much like a hot potato at this point for the way that it's played out. And in a way, I hate that they dropped the show, but at the same time, I can kind of understand why this has happened. This is going to be a final... excuse me, I can't talk right now. There will be a follow-up video to this. Maybe not this week, but definitely with next week, because the Song of Ice and Fire community, unfortunately, is plagued by people who just absolutely love to throw out spoilers to non-book readers. And this is something that definitely needs to be addressed in an upcoming video. Of course, other people have addressed this in the past. Milena Pendulum certainly has done a fantastic job of addressing this problem. But unfortunately, there's just a lot of spoilers which have raged out of this, and it's really gotten out of control. There's a lot of flack that's being directed at Martin, particularly for the way that the scene was wrote in, and if people are absolutely upset that if this is a scene from the book, and they hate that it's being played out the way it is right now. As much as I hate together that people would actually be stupid enough to throw death threats his way, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at that. That is definitely a practice I would not condone. I haven't seen any yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if people were actually stupid enough to throw those out there. This is definitely a shitstorm that I have not seen since Dan Slott's developments with Doc Ock taking over Spider-Man's body. And this is a major problem which definitely needs to be addressed, and I will get around to doing a video next week on that. But all in all, with this episode being the high point of what it is, for the most part, I at least enjoyed the way that the Red Wedding was carried out. There's not really a lot to say about the episodes. In terms of this being like the supposed high point of the season, there were aspects of this episode that I enjoyed, but compared to the other 9th episodes of the past season, this one is kind of on the underwhelming side a little bit when you get down to it. The stuff with John is just really dragged like a Beverly Hills Chihuahua dragging its ass on the cashmere carpet, and the plot points of a show which has been, in a way, kind of dumbed down and simplified, it's getting to be kind of dragging a little bit. Now, this was still a good episode, and I've enjoyed this season much better than I did the past one, but there are some major problems to it, which I will be addressing, especially once the finale airs next week. This video was just kind of off the cuff. I haven't really prepared for it mentally as much as I wanted to, but hey, this is pretty much my thoughts on it. So, until next week, probably be looking for me to jump in on a collab video or two talking about what I thought about this season, and I will definitely be back here next week to dish out my final thoughts on this episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will catch y'all next week. Peace.